If the moon rises when it should tonight, one of Enoch's final signs has not happened. That may sound like a small detail. It is not. For years, people have searched the Book of Enoch for the end of the world in its giants, imprisoned angels, burning valleys, and heavenly throne. But the book's most exact sequence of end-time signs is hidden somewhere far less dramatic, inside a long ancient lesson about how to count days. Then, without warning, the lesson changes. The angel Uriel finishes explaining the courses of the sun and moon. He turns to Enoch and describes 8 events in a precise order. First, the year no longer seems to fit. Then the seed misses its season. The rain fails. The fruit arrives late. After that, the moon, sun, and stars no longer appear as expected. Human beings misread what is happening above them. And only then does the text say evil multiplies and punishment comes. This is not the usual list of wars, earthquakes, and rumors of war. It is a countdown built into time itself. And the strangest part is that the first sign may already look familiar, while the last signs would be almost impossible to fake. So we are going to read Enoch's sequence in the order it was written. We will separate what the ancient text actually says from what modern prophecy videos have added to it. And by the end, we will be able to answer 2 different questions. What are Enoch's exact signs? And at what point does the book say the end truly begins? The answer to the second question is not where most people would place it. Before the warning begins, Enoch spends chapter after chapter watching the sky. The section is now called the Book of the Heavenly Luminaries. Uriel leads Enoch through a universe governed by appointment. The sun rises through one portal and sets through another. The moon increases and decreases by measure. Winds have directions. Seasons have leaders. Days are counted. Nothing wanders because it is bored, arrives because it is lucky, or remains in place by accident. Portal follows portal, month follows month. Fractions of moonlight and lengths of days repeat until the repetition becomes the point. Enoch is being shown a world that keeps faith with its order. The sun does not decide one morning that its task no longer matters. The moon does not demand a different course. Rain, wind, frost, seed, and star all belong to a pattern larger than themselves. Creation can be trusted because it is not pretending to be free of every limit. This is why the calendar matters. The system described in this section uses a year of 364 days, 52 complete weeks, divided into 4 equal seasons. Special days mark the turns between those seasons. In the world imagined by the text, sacred time, agricultural time, and heavenly time belong together. That calendar did not perfectly match the solar year as we measure it now, and scholars still debate how ancient communities corrected the difference. Chapter 80 is not a modern observatory report, but he cared about an idea modern people understand immediately. If the clock is wrong, everything scheduled by the clock begins to drift. A festival arrives on the wrong day. A farmer reads the season incorrectly. A community loses agreement about when a year begins. The error may be small at first, almost invisible, but a small error repeated long enough can move an entire society out of alignment. That is the tension Uriel builds before he gives Enoch the signs. For several chapters, order appears exact. Then Uriel says, "In the days of the sinners, the order will begin to break." The first sign is that the years will be shortened. This line has created some wild interpretations. People have claimed it means the planet will spin faster, that hours will literally lose minutes, or that human beings will feel time accelerating as the end approaches. The text does not say any of those things. It says the years will be shortened. In a book concerned with calendars, seasons, and the correct counting of days, the most natural first question is not whether time itself changes, it is whether people can still measure the year correctly. And the next lines support that reading. Enoch does not say people look at a clock and watch the hands move faster. He says seed will be laid in the land, things on the earth will alter and fail to appear at their proper time, rain will be held back, and fruit will not grow when expected. The shortened year is revealed by a mismatch. The human count says the season has arrived. The field says it has not. That is a much more disturbing sign than the feeling that life is moving quickly. Everyone feels that as they grow older. Enoch describes something observable. The name of the season and the behavior of the season no longer agree. Imagine an ancient farmer standing at the edge of a field. He does not possess a weather app, a satellite image, or a long-range forecast. His calendar is memory joined to the sky. He knows when a certain wind usually turns. He knows when a shadow reaches a familiar place. He knows when his father planted and when his grandfather harvested. Now the appointed time arrives, but the conditions do not. He waits. The seed waits. The first sign is not a spectacular object appearing in heaven. It is a season failing to keep an appointment. And that leads directly to the second sign. The seed becomes tardy on the land. Notice the precision. The text does not immediately announce famine. A late seed is not yet an empty table. It is a delay near the beginning of the chain. That makes it easy to ignore. One disappointing field does not feel like the end of an age. But agriculture is built on narrow windows. Miss the rain and the seed remains a possibility buried in dry ground. The danger is not merely that food becomes scarce. It is that the old knowledge of when to act becomes less reliable. This is the first escalation in Enoch's sequence. The year becomes difficult to read. Then human action, timed to that year, begins to fail. The third sign is the withholding of rain. Rain in the ancient world was never background weather. It was the difference between a future and a memory. A ruler could store grain, build walls, hire soldiers, and issue decrees. None of it could force water out of a clear sky. That helplessness remains. We can move water, clean it, measure it, and price it. We cannot command a cloud to release rain over the field that needs it. Chapter 100 later makes this point with bitter sarcasm. Enoch tells the wealthy to offer gold and silver to the rain so it will not be withheld. The rain cannot be bribed. That line exposes the weakness hidden beneath human power. Money can purchase insulation from a crisis for a while. It can move a person to safer ground or transfer the cost to someone unseen, but it cannot negotiate with the structure of creation. The World Meteorological Organization reported that the 11 years from 2015 through 2025 were the warmest 11 years in the instrumental record. During the year 2025, extremes of heat, heavy rain, tropical cyclones, drought, and wildfire disrupted lives, livelihoods, and food systems in different regions. That does not prove Chapter 80 is being fulfilled. Climate change is measured through physical processes, and Enoch's language comes from an ancient theological world. We should not pretend an old sentence is a modern scientific graph. But the resemblance explains why the passage now feels close. Across the world, communities are discovering that the calendar printed on the wall does not guarantee the season remembered by the people who live there. Rain can arrive too late, too hard, in the wrong place, or not at all. Traditional expectations built over generations can become less dependable within one lifetime. This is where careless interpretation becomes tempting. A drought appears, and someone announces that Enoch's prophecy has been completed. But the text does not give one drought as proof. It describes a sequence. The fourth sign is that the fruits of the earth and the trees are withheld from their time. Again, timing matters as much as quantity. Fruit can exist and still fail the people who depend on it if it comes too early, too late, or all at once. The breakdown of order does not always look like emptiness. Sometimes everything is present but no longer meets at the right moment. That is the hidden theme connecting the first four signs. The year, the seed, the rain, and the fruit lose correspondence. They no longer answer one another. The first half of Enoch's countdown therefore takes place close to the ground. It can be seen in soil, water, branches, and the anxious face of someone who planted, based on a promise the season did not keep. Then the vision looks upward. The fifth sign is that the moon alters its order and does not appear at its time. This is the moment the passage crosses a line. Late rain is familiar. Failed crops are tragic but familiar. Even confusion over calendars has happened many times in history. A moon that genuinely abandons its order would be something else entirely. The moon is one of humanity's oldest clocks. Long before mechanical timepieces, its changing face divided the darkness into recognizable intervals and helped communities agree about months, festivals, and journeys. If the moon does not appear when expected, there are at least two possible meanings. The first is human error. The moon continues faithfully, but a corrupted calendar predicts the wrong night. In that reading, the sky has not failed. The observer has lost the ability to read it. The second is cosmic disorder. The moon itself no longer follows its appointed pattern. In that reading, the failure that began with seasons on Earth has reached the heavens. The passage leaves room for both ideas because it soon describes the stars changing their tasks, while also saying the order of the stars will be concealed from sinners and their thoughts will err. This ambiguity is not a weakness. It creates the central mystery of the chapter. Has creation become disordered? Or have human beings become so disordered that faithful creation now appears confusing to them? The answer may be both within the moral logic of Enoch. The environment carries consequences, and the mind interpreting those consequences is no longer trustworthy. But one thing must be said clearly. We can still calculate the phases of the moon with extraordinary precision. Astronomers can predict eclipses long before they occur. The moon has not visibly abandoned its course. So if Enoch meant a literal astronomical disruption, this sign has not happened. That distinction is essential. A prophecy test that can never produce the answer, "not yet," is not a test. It is a machine for turning every headline into confirmation. Enoch's sixth sign is even stranger. The sun appears in the evening and shines more brightly than the appointed order of light. The ancient wording here is difficult. Parts of the sentence are uncertain in old translations, and honest readers should resist building an entire end-time timeline on a damaged phrase. But the central image remains. The familiar measure of daylight no longer behaves as expected. This is not simply a hot afternoon. The passage is about order, appearance, and time. The sun is seen where or when its observer does not expect it, with a brightness that does not match the established pattern. To an ancient person, this would not be a curious astronomical event to photograph. It would feel as if the ceiling of reality had moved. The same sun that marked work, worship, travel, rest, planting, and harvest would no longer confirm the schedule beneath it. But Uriel is not finished. The seventh sign is that many chiefs of the stars transgress their prescribed order. They change their courses and tasks. They fail to appear in their appointed seasons. Modern readers may imagine planets flying out of orbit, but Enoch can use stars for both heavenly lights and the angelic rulers associated with them. The visible and invisible worlds overlap. That means the sign carries two kinds of disorder at once. The lights no longer keep their stations. The rulers no longer keep their tasks. This is the celestial version of a society in which every office still exists, but no office performs the duty for which it was created. The name remains. The function disappears. Yet even here, the passage does not immediately announce judgment. It gives one more sign, and this final sign reveals why the sequence began with a calendar. The order of the stars becomes concealed from the sinners. Their thoughts go wrong concerning the stars. They mistake them for gods. This is the eighth and final condition before the text says evil is multiplied and punishment comes. The last sign is interpretation. Human beings witness a breakdown they cannot explain. Instead of becoming humble, they worship the thing they misunderstand. That is a remarkably sharp description of fear. When the system that made life predictable begins to fail, people become desperate for someone or something that claims control. They will trust a sign, a ruler, an image, a calculation, or a voice that promises to make uncertainty disappear. The object of worship changes across centuries. The mechanism does not. First, the old order becomes difficult to read. Then anxiety searches for certainty. Finally, certainty is offered at the price of discernment. This is why the sequence cannot be reduced to unusual weather. Enoch's end-time signs move through three levels. The first level is earthly disorder. Year, seed, rain, and fruit no longer meet at the proper time. The second is heavenly disorder. Moon, sun, and stars no longer confirm the familiar pattern. The third is inward disorder. People no longer know how to interpret what they see, and they give ultimate trust to created powers. Only after all three does chapter 80 say, evil will be multiplied and punishment will come. Now we can finally ask when the end begins. Is it when the rain stops? When the moon arrives on the wrong night? When the stars change their courses? The Book of Enoch gives two answers, depending on what we mean by begin. The warning phase begins quietly, when time and life stop corresponding. The year says one thing, but the field says another. The signs begin at the first sustained fracture between the order people rely on and the world they actually encounter. But the judgment phase begins later. Chapter 91 supplies the threshold. Enoch says violence, unrighteousness, transgression, blasphemy, apostasy, and impurity increase. Then he uses a word that changes the scale. They become consummated. They reach fullness. Their roots form a structure. The end does not begin because the first evil person appears. Evil people existed in Enoch's remembered past. It does not begin because one crop fails or one nation goes to war. It begins when separate disorders lock together and become a system capable of reproducing itself. The calendar is wrong, so action is mistimed. The harvest fails, so fear grows. The heavens no longer reassure the observer. The frightened observer places trust in false powers. Those powers multiply violence and deception. Then violence is no longer an event inside the structure. Violence is part of the structure. This connecting chain is an interpretation, not a sentence Enoch writes in modern analytical language, but it explains the order of his images. The book is not scattering random disasters across a page. It shows relationships failing, between time and season, seed and rain, heaven and earth, sign and meaning, power and responsibility. The end begins when those failures reinforce one another. And judgment begins when the structure has reached the point that it will not correct itself. That is why Enoch speaks about roots. A weed on the surface can be cut down. A root system beneath the ground can return after every visible leaf is removed. When injustice has roots, replacing one ruler or repairing one law may change the appearance without changing what keeps growing underneath. This also explains something else people often miss. Enoch's signs are not given so that spectators can win an argument about dates. They are given to Enoch while he is preparing words for Methuselah and future generations. The calendar lesson is an ethical lesson. Creation keeps its task. Human beings abandon theirs. The great accusation is not that the sun, moon, rain, and seed are weak. It is that human beings demand order from the universe while refusing order within themselves. We want the season to be faithful while our promises are temporary. We want the moon to keep its course while our principles change whenever they become costly. We want the rain to arrive without asking what our appetites have done to the land or to the people forced to live with the consequences. In chapter 101, Enoch points to sailors terrified when the sea becomes violent. Their possessions are in the ship. They suddenly remember there are powers they cannot control. His question is painfully human. If sailors fear the sea, why do people living on the earth behave as though nothing stands above their desire? The sea reveals the illusion. So does the field. So does the sky. This is where the title, Exact Signs, needs one final correction. Enoch is exact about the order of the signs, but he is not exact about a date. He names no modern nation, no president, no machine, and no numbered year for the final sequence. Anyone who claims to have extracted a guaranteed date from chapter 80 has added a certainty that Uriel does not give Enoch. The sequence is exact. The calendar date is not. That may be intentional. A date would allow people to remain unchanged until the deadline. A pattern forces every generation to examine the world it is building. So where are we in the sequence now? The honest answer is uncomfortable because it refuses both easy extremes. We cannot say nothing resembles the opening signs. Seasons are shifting. Water and agriculture are under pressure in many places. Extreme weather is disrupting the old expectations by which communities have lived. The correspondence between remembered seasons and present conditions is becoming less reliable for millions of people. But we also cannot say every sign has been completed. The moon still keeps a predictable cycle. The sun has not abandoned its path. The stars have not visibly left their courses. If the later signs are literal cosmic events, the text terminal sequence has not arrived. If they refer instead to human beings losing the correct calendar and misreading the heavens, then the warning is about confusion, not an astronomical collapse. That reading also deserves caution. Disagreement about calendars is ancient. It does not by itself prove the end of history. What we can say is that Enoch gives a boundary. Sensational claims often erase. Early signs can repeat. The final convergence is different. Droughts have happened before. Calendars have been disputed before. Empires have worshipped heavenly powers before. Violence has reached terrible levels before. None of those facts alone makes a generation the last. The decisive moment is when earthly disorder, heavenly disorder, and moral disorder become one event. When the systems people trusted fail together, the meaning of the failure is corrupted, and violence reaches the fullness chapter 91 describes. That is when Enoch's warning stops sounding cyclical and becomes terminal. And that is why the moon matters. It acts as a line in the text between signs we can compare loosely with ordinary history and signs that demand something far greater. As long as we can look up, predict the moon, and verify that it keeps its course, we should be suspicious of anyone using one storm, one eclipse, or one disaster to announce that the full sequence is complete. An eclipse is not the moon abandoning its order. It is the moon keeping it. The darkness surprises the unprepared observer, but the event itself is evidence of extraordinary regularity. It can be calculated because the heavens have not become random. That may be the most beautiful reversal in this investigation. People point to a darkened sun or a red moon as proof that order is ending, yet the ability to predict the event may demonstrate the opposite. The sign is not that the heavens look frightening. The sign is that their appointed pattern can no longer be found. Enoch does not ask us to fear every unusual light in the sky. He asks what happens when light no longer tells the truth about time, or when people become unable to understand the truth it tells. So the exact signs of the end times, according to chapter 80, begin with shortened years, late seed, withheld rain, and fruit missing its season. They escalate to the moon failing its expected time, the sun appearing outside its familiar measure, and star rulers abandoning their assigned courses. They reach their moral crisis when human beings misread the heavens and offer worship to powers that cannot save them. Then evil multiplies. Then punishment comes. Not before the chain. Not because one frightening event went viral. Not because someone found a date hidden in a number. The beginning is a fracture in order. The threshold is the fracture becoming a structure. And the final confirmation is that the disorder can no longer be mistaken for an ordinary cycle. That leaves us with a responsibility more serious than decoding a timetable. If the early pattern is appearing, then the correct response is not excitement that a prophecy may be coming true. A late harvest is somebody's hunger. Withheld rain is somebody's empty well. A violent sea is somebody's last journey. Enoch's signs are not decorations for a theory. They are human suffering described through the systems that make life possible. To read the book with a soul is to remember the people inside the sign. And if the later pattern has not appeared, then fear should not be manufactured to complete it. There is no faith in calling every eclipse a warning and every disaster the final one. There is only the appetite to feel certain while frightened. The Book of Enoch offers something harder than certainty. It offers attention. Watch the relationship between the calendar and the field. Watch the relationship between wealth and water. Watch the relationship between what people see and what they are told it means. Watch for violence becoming rooted deeply enough that the structure protects it. And when you look at the moon, do not ask only whether it appears strange. Ask whether it is still keeping its appointment. Because in Enoch's overlooked countdown, the end is not announced by the sky becoming dramatic. It is announced when earth, heaven, and the human mind can no longer agree on what time it is.